Hey, welcome to another video. So today we're going to be going into everything there is to know about ORYX, the Taken King. But before we begin, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Sith Citadel Discord, links in the description, and consider becoming a join member or sending us super thanks if you wish to further support the channel. Otherwise, let's jump straight into it. ORYX, the Taken King, born Arish, and formerly known as ORYX, meaning the Long Thought, was the sovereign of the Osmium throne, the god king of the Hive, and the master of the Taken. Reborn in the darkness itself through a wicked pact with the worm gods, ORYX is the founder of the Hive race, alongside his sisters and fellow deities, Savathun the Witch Queen, and Zivorath, the god of war. Of all the Hive gods, he alone held the power to bend other races to his will through the power to take. ORYX is also the father of the dreaded Crota, a deadly Hive prince who slew thousands of guardians through the great disaster, Nokris, his estranged firstborn and herald of the worm god Zal, as well as two death singers and inventors of the Oversoul, twins Iranak and Nirhalak. Enraged at the death of Crota, ORYX traveled to the Sol system aboard his dreadnought, seeking revenge, but was defeated by the Guardian and escaped to his throne world. His second match with the Guardians resulted in his permanent death, and ended the threat he posed to the Sol system, leaving behind a vacancy on his Osmium throne that would remain empty for many years to come. ORYX traces his origins to a gas giant named Fundament, where the Proto-Hive eked out a harsh existence on floating continents, comprised of the shards of their shattered homeworld. ORYX was born as Arish, a Proto-Hive female, and one of three surviving daughters of the Osmium King, ruler of the continent called the Osmium Court. Arish's sisters were Zero and Sathona, who together made up the final brood stirred by the Osmium King. When the Osmium King was 10 years old, a lifetime to a Proto-Hive, he succumbed to senility madness, fearing an event called the Synergy, wherein Fundament's 52 moons would align and create a massive tidal wave that would destroy all of Fundament's civilizations. Teox, a sterile mother who had served as a teacher to the king's daughters, feared the royal heirs were too weak to succeed the king and invited a rival kingdom, the Helium Drinkers of the Helium Court, to invade the Osmium Court as their regent. But the Helium Drinkers invaded and slew the Osmium King. But Arish and her sisters, 2 years old at the time, escaped on a ship and vowed to return one day for their revenge. After a year of traveling the sea, the sisters salvaged an ancient high-tech ship they called the Needle from the Shibui Maelstrom. Zero wanted to sell it at the Kaharan Atoll, a gathering place of Fundament's many species, in order to raise enough money to hire a mercenary army, but Arish wanted to take command of the ship. Sathona sided with Arish, goaded on by a worm that their father had kept. The worm had washed up on the Osmium Court's shores and was seemingly dead, but Sathona could hear it speak. The sisters spent the next 2 years reactivating the ship, until Arish decided to use it to fulfill its intended purpose. She wanted to dive into Fundament's core in the hopes of learning a secret that would prevent the Synergy. As they descended, the sisters encountered a vast creature called the Leviathan, a disciple of the Traveler. The Leviathan warned the sisters against proceeding any further, telling them that they faced a choice between the sky and the deep, the light and the darkness, the way of life and the way of death. The sisters rejected the Leviathan, unable to accept that allowing their people to suffer was a better way, and instead decided to follow the worm Sathona had saved, which urged them to continue diving. Deep within the Fundament Ocean, the sisters encountered the worm gods, who drew their power from the darkness itself. Yul, Ir, Zul, and Akka, the virtuous worms. The worm gods claimed that they had lived and grown in Fundament's depths for millions of years, trapped by the Leviathan and the Traveler. They had called many species to Fundament, hoping one would be tenacious enough to find them. They offered Zero, Sathona, and Arish immortality if they would allow themselves to be hosts for the worm's larvae, with the caveat that if the sisters ceased to obey their natures, Zero's desire to test her strength, Sathona's cunning, Arish's inquisitiveness, their worms would consume them. Furthermore, the stronger the sisters became, the greater their worms' appetites would be. The sisters accepted the pact. Zero took the Night Morph and became Zivorath, the god of war. Sathona took the Mother Morph and became Savathun, the Witch Queen, and Arish took the King Morph, transforming into a male and becoming ORYX, the king of the Hive. Over the following years, the siblings returned to their people and spread the worms among them, creating the first hive and enabling them to first liberate the Osmium court, then drive Teox and the other fearful species of Fundament to Cahorn Atoll, and finally to build spaceships and break free of Fundament entirely. As ORYX and his sisters forced an ultimatum on the remaining proto-hive to accept the worms or perish, ORYX turned his attention to Fundament's moons, the Ammonites, who had allied with the Traveler and gave asylum to Teox. Initially, he was willing to negotiate with the Ammonites, but his sister Savathun, under pressure from the worms, killed ORYX as punishment. Rather than dying, ORYX's soul instead passed to the Ascendant realm, or the Throne World, where his soul resided until he returned to the mortal realm. Rebuked, ORYX purged what sympathy and goodwill he had left. Becoming a merciless tyrant, he and his sisters warred with and killed one another on a regular basis after the defeat of the Ammonites, as part of their worship of the sword logic, in their attempt to become the sharpest blades in the universe, heading to their Ascendant realms when defeated. Their war of revenge against Teox had transformed into a campaign of genocide, when they slew the Ammonites and other interstellar civilizations to feed their worms. The Lords of the Hive also established their Ascendant realms, with ORYX naming his the High War. During the war with the Akume, ORYX came to realize that the worms had deceived him and his sisters. Their worms' appetites were growing past their ability to feed with death. Meeting with his sisters in the Ascendant realm, surrounded by their servants, some of which despised them for showing weakness, they despaired over their dilemma. When his sisters offered their power to help ORYX find a way to save them, ORYX killed them, then used that power to confront his patron god Akka. He killed Akka so that he may steal its ability to call upon the deep, and created the Tablets of Ruin, which gave him the power to take. His transformation complete, ORYX was now ORYX, the Taken King. During the subsequent war with the Akume, ORYX revived Xivu Arath in an act of war, and revived Savathun in an act of cunning. He then decreed the Tith system. Each hive would kill their enemies, take some to feed their worm, and tith the rest to their superior. Thralls would tith to acolytes, acolytes would tith to knights or wizards, the knights and wizards would tith to the Ascendant Hive. Those who commanded legions of warriors and earned the right to enter the Hive God's Ascendant realms. All of this violence would eventually reach ORYX, Savathun, and Xivu Arath, allowing their worms to feed on violence while continuing to invoke their inner natures. After destroying the Tashabethi, ORYX used his Tablets of Ruin to commune directly with the voice in the darkness itself. It explained to ORYX that the sword logic was not death for the sake of death, but to aid in the creation of a final shape, which was its ultimate endgame to bring order to an anarchic universe. However, while he spoke to the witness, Savathun and Xivu Arath conspired to maroon him in its realm, cut off his flow of tribute, and steal his tablets. Wandering within the deep and fearing that he was becoming a nihilist, ORYX eventually decided to sire his own spawn. After fighting his way back into real space and defeating his sisters, the results of this were Crota and the Death Singer twins Iranuk and Ir-Halak. Unknown to most, ORYX had another son named Nokris, but unlike Crota, he was physically weak in comparison, while Nokris honed his mind, learned powerful magic, and hoarded knowledge. ORYX disfavored him incredibly. Ultimately, Nokris sought to prove himself by speaking to the worm gods the same way ORYX himself did. While most of the worm gods rejected Nokris, the disfavored son managed to forge a pact with the Zal. Nokris traded his heart for some of Zal's power and the secrets of necromancy. ORYX soon learned about his son's activities and was utterly furious. Nokris's actions were sacrilege, as necromancy was a heretical violation of the sword logic. For his crimes, the king of the Hive exiled him and removed all references of his disowned son from the world's grave, the books of sorrow, and most of his own memories. Only a statue remained as the only reference to his forgotten son. One day, the Death Singers were refining their death songs and came up with the idea of the Oversoul. Intrigued, ORYX commanded Crota to watch his sisters, so that he might learn something. However, while ORYX was off studying the deep, Crota was deceived by Savathun into using his cleaver to cut a portal in the High War, allowing the Vex to enter. For 100 years, the children of ORYX waged war with the Vex, who quickly deduced the sword logic and worship of the deep as key to attaining power in the High War. However, while the Hive were able to overpower the Vex, they were unable to push them out. as they lost too much of their power when entering the Vex conflicts. The situation became so severe that the Worm era itself demanded that ORYX return and end the war. Quickly returning to the High War, ORYX used his powers to take the Vex and clear his throne world. Angered at his son's imperfection, ORYX threw Crota into the Vex Gate network, decreeing that come home victorious or die forgotten. At first, Crota resented his father for his seeming abandonment, but after time came to understand his father and built temples to ORYX and the Deep, eventually becoming a vital link in ORYX's Tith of Death and achieving godhood himself. However, ORYX recognized that the threat of the Vex invading his throne world could not happen again, so I moved to the High War into the mighty Dreadnought, scrimshawed from the remains of Akka. During the Hive's campaign against the Harmony and the Vex, Kira Blade Transform presented ORYX with a simulation of his former self, Arish. ORYX looked upon the simulation with amusement, while Arish looked upon ORYX in horror, demanding to know what he had done to her sisters and her people. In the end, ORYX took Kira and presented the Vex and its simulation to Savathun. When she asked him what proof they had that they were doing was right, ORYX simply replied that the Hive's existence was proof enough in their own convictions to live eternal by the sword logic. Following the war with the Harmony, Savathun decided that her fleets would enter the black hole that the Harmony lived around, claiming they would become stronger for it, while Ziva Arath took her fleets away from ORYX's as she felt he constrained her too much. The exact nature of ORYX was once unknown to the Guardians, but the name ORYX appeared often enough in Hive rituals that it could not be ignored. Shrines dedicated to ORYX used by the Hive to communicate with ORYX across the universe were known to exist throughout the Sol system. Osiris studied the Hive extensively and foretold that the spawn of Crota would one day pave the way for ORYX's coming by snuffing out the worlds of light. Members of the Blood of ORYX, Hive sect, are thought to be a direct servant to ORYX himself, though it is speculated that he is the master of all other Hive sects as well. After learning of the death of his son, Crota, ORYX personally traveled to the Sol system aboard his dreadnought, accompanied by a Hive fleet and his taken army. While staging his fleet in the rings of Saturn, ORYX and his fleet were attacked by the forces of the Reefborn Awoken, led by Queen Mara Sov and Prince Uldren Sov. An intense battle ensued, as both forces seemed to be equally matched. Queen Mara and her Techions then summoned the Harbingers, weapons of mysterious power that plowed through ORYX's fleet, but was unable to damage the dreadnought. ORYX activated his Oversoul in return, and unleashed a massive wave of energy that not only destroyed the Awoken fleet, but also his own, and created a massive hole within Saturn's rings. Now with his forces stalled above Saturn, ORYX was forced to stand down his invasion of the inner system, and therefore unleashed his Taken to regain his lost advantage. At some point after the Battle of Saturn, ORYX's essence took the remaining Techions from the battle, and managed to seep into the Dreaming City that they inadvertently opened for him, causing a Taken corruption that warped the Awoken city in between their reality and their ascendant plane. There it reached Riven, last of the known wish-granting Amakara that Mara Sov had hid away. ORYX offered to take Riven away. Riven, eager to try bargaining with the king, told ORYX to take whatever he wished, as long as he wished. ORYX's forces first attacked Cabal bases on Phobos and Mars. Cabal detachments were devastated within hours, with the Sand Eaters suffering a catastrophic 58% casualties, while the Blind Legion and the Dust Giants lost 35 and 39% of their numbers respectively. The Vanguard discovered ORYX's presence after sending a Guardian to Phobos to investigate a Cabal distress signal, by which time Taken covens began appearing on multiple worlds, ushering in the Taken War. ORYX was nearly beaten when the Guardian breached his sanctum and attacked him, but this was only a temporary setback. Using his Taken powers, he warped himself into the Ascendant plane. Meanwhile, his Taken, led by his Echoes, continued to harass the system. Once the Blights had been removed, the Guardians turned their attention on ORYX and his Hive and Taken champions. By overthrowing the court of ORYX and killing his minions, they were able to invade deeper into the Dreadnought. After killing his closest allies, like the War Priest and Golgoroth, including his own daughters, ORYX returns to fight the Guardians once more, this time having transformed himself into his true Ascendant form, a gigantic monster with the power to crush the Guardians with his fists. Here he attempted to pull the Guardians into the darkness and take them, but they were able to use ORYX's own captured light against him. By slaying the Light Eater ogres, and then detonating the light they left behind. The blight in ORYX's chest erupted in a violent burst that brought about the king's permanent death. Through his lifeless, calcified body was left adrift in orbit around Saturn. ORYX's ravenous heart, however, remained. Eris Morn used the heart to construct a weapon, the Torch of Malice. Ironically, in accordance to the Book of Sorrow, ORYX had intended this, as it would have been his final means of maintaining his ascendant immortality through the continued use of the ravenous heart to feed, as well as mantling the one who vanquished him as his successor to the Osmium throne. He only succeeded in one of his goals, however. The one who defeated him, the Guardian, would not take ORYX's throne, and therefore defied the logic ORYX spent millennia perfecting. Known as the first navigator in life, ORYX's defeat would leave the Hive and the Taken leaderless within the Sol system, but unfortunately they were still enough of a threat that the Guardians continued to fight them. The Taken in particular languished without the Master's power, and continued to decay unless someone took ORYX's place. Two individuals in particular would attempt to assume ORYX's throne, Alak-Hul the Darkblade and Malak the Pride of ORYX. However, both were quickly killed by the same Guardians who defeated ORYX, before either could take up the mantle of the Taken King. A third individual, Norusk, the servant of ORYX, attempted to flee the prison of elders, but was slain by a fire team before he could assume the throne. Even by the time of the Red War, the Taken continued to haunt the system, primarily on Earth and Io, and it appears that ORYX's sister, Savathun, has not only taken command of hive broods on Titan, but is also attempting to seize control of the Taken. At the end of the Red War and the reawakening of the Traveler in the frozen ice caps on Mars, the worm god Zol awakened to destroy the war-mind core of Rasputin. Leading Zol's army was ORYX's loss and Ison's son, Nokris. However, like Crota and ORYX, Nokris would fail against the Guardians, and Zol followed shortly after. However, it turned out both Zol and Nokris would find a way to cheat death, the former by transforming into the Whisper of the Worm, using the anthem Anthemane, in a similar vein to ORYX, and the latter thanks to Zol's power and his own knowledge of necromancy. At a later date during the chaos that engulfed the Reef, Savathun gained a new and powerful ally in the Amakara ORYX had taken during the beginning of the Taken War, Riven. It is implied that his defeat was due in some way to his previous bargain with Riven. Nonetheless, without a master, Riven was aimless until the Witch Queen encouraged the wish-making creature to serve her, allowing her to be closer to gaining full control over the Taken. Though Riven would ultimately fall to the same warrior of light that defeated ORYX, her physical death would allow the Dreaming City to be taken. Meanwhile, ORYX's youngest sister, Zivo-Arath, the Hive God of War, has also begun a campaign of the Hive and Taken to raid the Dreaming City of its secrets. This is likely the result of possible collusion between the two Hive God sisters against the Guardians that vanquished their brother. ORYX's name and form would continue to haunt the Guardians who defeated him. A rogue Lightbearer in particular, the Drifter, found him as the scariest Hive he could think of, and used his form to create a primeval Taken in the Tier 3 of his Reckoning game. This Taken Guardian's face would be known as the likeness of ORYX, which is a shadowy projection of ORYX, the Taken King. Much later on, the daughters of Crota, ORYX's granddaughters led by Hashladun, would seek to use the energies of the Lunar Pyramid to regain the Hive's advantage against the Guardians and avenge their fallen lineage. Taking command of the Hidden Swarm, constructing the massive red fortress of the Scarlet Keep, and utilizing forbidden Hive magic, the daughters of Crota managed to control the nightmares and protect themselves against the Pyramid's energy. Further, Hashladun and her sisters conceived a plot to recreate the fallen ORYX, a necessary violation of the sword logic since the Taken King was never succeeded by his conquerors. However, Hashladun would be destroyed by the Guardians that fell her father and grandfather before her plot could reach fruition. The Witch Queen, the Hive Ghost Finch, led the Guardian to a temple Savathun had built in the throne world and dedicated to her brother. And guarded by ORYX's foster son, Alak-Hul, now resurrected in the light as the Lightblade, it houses an enormous statue of ORYX defeating Akka. More importantly to the mission, though, it also turned out to be the resting spot of one of the Tablets of Ruin. As the Guardian made their investigation into how the Witch Queen and her Lucent brood managed to claim the light, the tablet they acquired from the temple showed them her plan to steal the Traveler was more so they learned that ORYX's sister had refused to take her brother's place as master of the Taken, and on going back to the decision they had made millennia ago. In contrast, Xivo Arath remained steadfast on the path ORYX and their family once walked together on, remaining furious at his death, but more so on the fact the Guardians did not take his place, calling it blasphemy. The Hive God of War would eventually consult with her fallen brother during her time in continuing the goal of reaching the final shape, regaling her exploits in conquering to battle, and her fury in Savathun's conversion to the light. In the end, Xivo Arath vowed to honor ORYX as the navigator that he was by ensuring the final shape happens. When Titan returned to the solar system after being absorbed by the Witness's powers, ORYX's body was found on the seabed, after stopping an attempt by the Lucent Brood to revive the Taken King. A team of the Hidden descended into the abyss to recover body samples for analysis. Following this were found concentrations of Taken energy in the cellular structure, and a darkness still active, but without direction and willpower, still capable of inducing hallucinations to those that came near it. This allowed the body to absorb knowledge and memories, but not to react. Furthermore, the biological mass of the corpse demonstrated a slow but active mitosis, which led the body to grow and change even without a mind. Despite the Hidden's advice to dispose of the body, Ikora decided to extract the corpse and hide it in a secure Vanguard site, as she did with Savathun. So what did you guys think of ORYX, the Taken King? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't already, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Sith Citadel Discord, links in the description, and consider becoming a join member or sending a super thanks if you wish to further support the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.